Hello there guys, in this video I'm going to talk you through a method you can use to make a rotational picture. So that's a picture that's going to have rotational symmetry. So I'm going to talk through the process and then I'll leave it to you to go away and be creative with it and see what you can make. So first of all, what you need to do is you need to choose an angle that you're going to use to make your picture. And the angle that you need to choose has to be a factor of 360. Okay, because there's 360 degrees in full turn. And what you're going to do is you're going to fit a picture going around in a circle. So depending on which one of these angles you might pick will determine how many repeats you get of this pattern that you have going round. So for example, if you go for 60 degrees, because there are 6 lots of 60 and 360, you'll have a picture which has rotational order 6. Okay, so 6 of the same picture going around in a circle. If you go for 72, that's 1/5, so you'll have 5. 45 is an 8, so you'll have 8 of them. Okay, so you choose whichever one you want to go for. If you are less confident with this, you might want to choose one of the bigger angles to start with. So I'd say 60 degrees and 72 degrees are really good ones to start off with because the process is a little bit shorter. If you go for 20 degrees, you'll have a lot of work to do because you'll have to copy it a lot more times. So 20 is 1/18, so you're going to have to copy it 18 times across. Okay. Before we start, I'm just going to show you a couple of examples so you get a sense of what sort of thing you can do. Now, these are a couple that I've made before. I used 60 degrees for my ones, so you'll notice that the pattern has rotational order 6. My ones I've done kind of Celtic knot theme because I find Celtic knots really interesting, but you can do whatever kind of pattern you want. So there's loads of different ways of doing this. So here are a couple of examples. Here's the first one. Whoops, sorry. Okay, so you'll notice with this that we've got this pattern that repeats going around 6 different times. Okay, and I used a 60-degree angle in order to make it happen 6 times. Here's another example. Again, this one's another 60-degree one. So I've got a pattern that I used that I repeated going around 6 times in order to make this work. Okay, so we'll see what different things you guys can come up with, but you need to choose one of those angles to begin. So once you've chosen one of these angles, what you're going to need to do is draw that angle onto a piece of either tracing paper, or if you're doing this from home and you don't have tracing paper, which I expect a lot of you don't, you can use greaseproof paper, and you can actually also just use a normal piece of paper. So this will work with any. Personally, I like using greaseproof paper because you can see through it a little bit and it works. And if you ask someone at home, greaseproof paper or baking paper, a lot of people have in their kitchens. So the first thing you need to do is you need to draw your angle onto that piece of greaseproof paper. I've got a little bit more on it than that at the moment, but you draw your angle, measure it really carefully at this stage, because if you go wrong, it won't quite line up at the end. So it's worth taking time to do it. Everything that you're drawing onto your greaseproof paper has to be done on pencil, not pen. The reason it needs to be done in pencil is because we're going to use a transfer effect, and that won't work if you do it in pen. So you're going to draw yourself an angle, any one of those degrees that you want to do. And then what you're going to do is you're going to measure a certain distance into the line. I went for just over 6 centimeters. So just so you know, this is what will make the picture line up and not look silly at the end. Okay. If you look at my lengths, the length from here to here is equal to the length from here to here. So before you draw a design, you want to make a little marker so that they're the same distance away from the point. Okay. Once you've done that, you draw a picture, any kind of squiggle you want. It's best if your squiggle isn't a symmetrical picture because it will look much better when you draw it. You can draw anything you want onto inside your angle, but try and start and end the same distance away from the corner. Okay. You can put circles and other things inside. I would suggest if the first time you're doing this, I would suggest go for something relatively simple. So I wouldn't go for anything more complicated than that if I were you. Okay. Once you've got your picture ready, you are going to start transferring it onto your piece of paper that you're doing your final piece on. But before you start doing that, you want to cut it so that the end lines are at the edges of the paper. So what I'm going to do with this piece of greaseproof paper is I'm going to chop it so that my lines go right to the edge of the paper, and that's just, you'll see why in a bit. It's going to make life easier. Okay, you can cut away any other excess paper if you want to, so you've only got what you want. Okay, so you've got that here. Now it's useful to make sure you know which way up you've done the drawing on, because when you start transferring this, in order to get the graphite from your pencil to go onto the paper, which is what we want in order to transfer our design, you need to make sure that the side you've drawn on is face down. Okay, if it's face down, then as you push on it, the graphite will go through onto your piece of paper. Okay, so I'm going to start demonstrating how to begin this design. Attempt to anyway on this board. So the first thing you want to do before you begin your picture, and I'm going to start this off in pen, even though you would do it all in pencil, just so you can see. Choose a point, preferably in the middle of your paper where your design is going to have its center point. And just for reference, very lightly in pencil, I'm doing it in pen so you can see it, but you'll do this in pencil. Very lightly in pencil, do a line going straight upwards, so you've just got a reference point where your design started. And once you've done that, you're going to lie your piece of tracing paper or baking paper down so that the point lies on the point that you've drawn, and one of your lines goes straight up along the line you've got. Okay, do make sure that the pencil that you drew on is face down. Okay, it needs to be in contact with the paper so that when you draw over it, it will transfer. Okay. Okay, right, I'm going to try and do this on this board, but apologies if it doesn't work very well because it's quite difficult to do. So once you've lined it up really carefully, what you're going to do is you're going to, using a pencil, trace over the design you've got so that it transfers onto the paper underneath. You might have to go over this a few times. Hopefully you'll find this easier to do than I have, because I'm trying to do it at 90 degrees to what I normally would. And I would suggest at the end as well, just trace over part of the angle line as well, so that you know where it's finished off. Or, because you've got your tracing paper going to the edge, you can just make a mark on the piece of paper that you can rub off later. If you've done it correctly, and you have to press down quite hard to make this work, when you lift your tracing paper up, your design should faintly show through on the paper. It is showing through for me, but apologies if you can't see it very well. You will have to draw over that once you've finished, and the more carefully you draw over it, the more exactly it will work for you. Okay. What you are going to do is you're going to repeat that process going round in the circle, and by the time you've finished it, you will have a shape with a rotational symmetry. So the reason that I did this line here at the end is because I can then draw a line with a ruler. So I'm going to do it roughly just so that you can get the sense. Okay, I'm now going to be putting one of the lines of my picture on that so that I then get the next one going round. So if I again put it so I've got the bit I drew on face down and line it up there, and then I'm going to keep doing that going round the circle until I end up with a design, hopefully, that fits exactly into the final piece, and I end up with rotational symmetry. Once you've finished with that, you will probably want to rub out these extra lines so that you end up just with the design, but you can leave them on if you like that, if it looks good as part of what you've got, and then of course you can add colour on whatever else you want to. If you are feeling particularly experimental, you might want to try layering one design on top of another, and that could work really well if you go for two angles that are factors of each other. So for example, you could go for a 40 degree and a 20 degree, and this one will appear twice as much as this one. Okay, or you could go for 60 and 30 or something like that. If you are going to try something more complicated, I would suggest try and do one that's big and then one that's quite small in the middle, so that you don't have them overlapping each other, and you can use different colours and things like that to have a go. But just go crazy with it and see what you can create and what you can make.